Hello, family. My name is James Trice, and I'm the creator of a podcast called YANA, or You Are Not Alone. You Are Not Alone is a podcast for Black men. It is more than just a podcast. It's a lifeline and a brotherhood. We're here to create a supportive, judgment-free space where Black men can have real, open conversations about what truly matters to us, from family and relationships to community, sports, culture, politics, faith, sex, race, education, and the challenges of everyday life. We dive deep into it all. Whether you're looking for advice, motivation, prayer, or just the comfort of knowing you're not walking this journey alone. YANA is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard, because none of us are meant to do life alone. Look for new episodes weekly wherever you get your podcasts. And look for me on Instagram at jbtrice123. Welcome to YANA. Grace and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this episode of YANA. You Are Not Alone. It's a space for Black men to come together and really talk about the issues that matter most to us. And this space gives Black men an opportunity to speak freely, uncensored, in a judgment-free environment about what we feel about the issues that concern us and our people. And today's guest is none other than Mujasi Bandeli, and a young man that actually I've been knowing since he was like a little guy running around the neighborhood here in South Minneapolis. But he's a grown man doing great things, he and his wife and his family. And I had to have him come on the show. And I think what I'm going to do with this one is this is going to be, I don't know how many parts, but this is the first of several parts of this conversation. So this is the beginning. And so tune into this one, and then we will give you an announcement about when the next one is going to be. But we're going to do this for a few times. And I don't know how many it's going to be, but we're going to just let God direct it the way he wants to direct it. So thank you for joining me, brother Mujasi.
Yes.
Introduce yourself, talk about who you are, the work you do, and then we get right into the discussion.
Yeah. This is always the hardest part for me is the introduction because I tend to be a humble individual and I don't like to talk about accolades and
Mm-hmm.
what I've accomplished, but I know it's necessity sometimes when you have to be able to talk about why you do what you do. And so again, my name is Mujasi Bandele. I'm a family practitioner here that focuses on Black families, African American families in the Twin Cities. Like my brother said, I've been really kind of like in relationship with my brother, Dr. James Trice, my brother James Trice, for since I was roughly around 11 or 12 years old, running around the Whittier neighborhood in South Minneapolis and just trying to understand who I was and stuff like that. And I managed to encounter him at that time, and he was doing, brother James Trice was doing some activist work with the neighborhood association, and from there just been admiring his work for years. And so it's an honor to be here. I'm one of the co-founders of Black Family Blueprint, which is a family development and family wellness company that's operating out of the Twin Cities, where we focus on building healthy, sustainable relationships with Black families and making sure they have social capital, bridging their social capital for the communal wellness of raising their children in a healthy village. And so that's what we do. And we provide a range of different services, from workshops to online courses, coaching, and community spaces. And our goal is to be able to collaborate with organizations who want to see the sustainability of families, particularly African American families, but also work with legislators and policymakers on how do we evaluate and make sure programs are effective with serving that particular population. But one of the key things that I'm excited to have this conversation with Brother James is my heart and my passion is raising and supporting the socialization and development of Black males into Black manhood. And I've been working on this type of work in practice for almost about 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I started really kind of in youth development work in 2001, 2002, under the tutelage and the mentorship of Ed Irwin, who used to run the Nia Imani
Hmm.
Youth and Family Development Center out of, at that time, it was Kwanzaa Church. Now they're Liberty Church. And I came under his wing. I've been knowing Ed for a while, but came under his wing and began doing youth work. And one of the key specialties that I really wanted to dive into is how do I support, do what he did for me, what James did to me, was provide that anchoring of mentorship and support to foster manhood development in young males. And I know how much of a struggle I was as a
Hmm.
young boy, as
Hmm.
a young male in Minneapolis, and how complicated it was, and the journey of walking in the space of manhood. And I wanted to find and figure out how I can do that same thing. What they did for me, how do I do that for the generation under me? And then, for the most part, that's been the spark and the passion behind what I do now, family development work, but how I started off in youth development work. And I'll land there for now.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is so powerful, man. So needed. Tell me what that
hmm
looks like, right? What does it look like
hmm
in real time? The work that you've done, what is manifested from that?
Mm. So, um, there's a lot. There's a few different ways I can cover this in terms of the projects and how that has manifested in what I do right now. But I would say my current project that I've been doing workshops and doing a lot of engagement around is my coaching piece under Black Men in Mind. And Black Men in Mind is a pierce, and it's a focus into adult age men who are trying to edify and develop themselves into a deeper practice of manhood. But Black Men in Mind is not just conversations about manhood. It's about how do you become a practicing man? How do you
Mm,
become mindfulness of your manhood? How do you anchor that in foundational practices in your day to day life that helps you to walk towards your ideal aspiration of manhood? And so, Black Men
mhm,
in Mind is not something that we just have a conversation and then men get to reaffirm themselves in what they believe manhood. It's deeper than that. It's examining what do you do that justifies your walk towards manhood. How does that look like in your routine? How does that anchor in your ideas, your principles, your virtues, your foundation? How do you have that relationship with a higher power that walks you in the ethicals and develop the ethos around what it means to be a man? So it's more than just conversation. It's about how do you learn how to rebuild and constitute yourself to make sure that your definition of manhood actually shows up in what you do and it
mhm,
corroborates with what your community needs. And so that's what Black Men in Mind, and that's one of the manifestations what it look like. But the key piece to that, to your another part of your question,
mhm,
is that relationships are critical in that walk and in that journey. And this is one thing that I think some of our manhood and masculine scholars in the 1990s didn't emphasize enough, nor did they give enough attention, because the research around Black manhood and masculinity
mhm,
can say
mhm,
it has its birth and origins in the 1990s, with a few
mhm,
scholars that I can name a little later. But they didn't emphasize the critical importance of relationships
hmm,
and how important that is. And this is directly to your question, that relationships, men have to be in healthy relationships with other men in order to edify and groom themselves into a communal definition of manhood. Because your manhood can't necessarily be individualized only to you. Your
hmm,
manhood has to be in response to the social needs of your people and your community, which requires relationship. It requires a dynamic exchange and interpersonal connection with other men and men who've been in that practice for a long time. And so the relationship component in Black Men in Mind is critically important, that we have to we're not talking about building best friends or, fraternal dynamics, but you have to have some type of relationship with men in a way where you can allow a little bit of transparency, a little bit of vulnerability, so we can touch those points, what one of my brothers in Memphis called the release points, that allows you to be able to plant some new seeds and grow. It's an emotional connection, it's an intellectual connection, and it's a motivational connection that allows you to put on some new behaviors to walk into that ideal manhood. And so relationships are critically important to help fortify what that looks like.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, the Bible says in Genesis 2:18 that it's not good for the man to be alone. And the
Mm,
interesting thing about that is before God said that, he declared everything that he was creating, it was good. Seven times
mm,
before that, when he created the earth and he created the animals and he created the sun and moon and the stars, all of his creation, and each time he created a certain section or a part, he said, and it is good. Then when he looked at the man, it's the first time that God declared that it wasn't good was when he said it's not
mm,
good for the man to be alone, which means that
mhm,
it is critical for us to have relationships. And so let me ask this then, how does that look like in real time? Practically, how has it played out? What have you seen in the men that you have
mm.
mentored or influenced that have been a part of your program? What metamorphosis have you seen in the men
Yeah,
that are part of your work?
that's a good question. And this is where the programmatic challenges come in at. Because in practice, you would think that if you just get men in together in a room, that there's going to be this magic that happens, that there's going to be this conversation and there's going to be connection and bridge. But that's not the case. And so what I've learned through trial and error is that even when I was working with young brothers, high schoolers and middle schoolers for so many years, our definition of manhood, whether it's distorted or is more grounded, still comes with the level of performative nature of what masculinity and manhood looks like. And when it's distorted, sometimes that performative nature can really create ice and blocks for brothers being able to genuinely connect. And it causes us to never really get to the levels of being able to have exchange and conversations that really build us. And so that requires, and this is where a lot of some of us make mistakes when we're designing these programs where we just want 1,000 Black men to show up, and we we have this assumption that if men are there and we just disseminate this information, that we're building and somehow improving our plot in manhood. And that's not, in practice, that's not really how it works. You have to be strategic with making sure that you understand the typology of men that needs to come together. And that typology could range in age, sometimes generation, sometimes economics a little bit, sometimes in ideas and beliefs, sometimes even in our religious perspectives. Like we have to make sure that there's men who's coming together under a particular faith, because there's a different dynamic that they can have when it's an interfaith conversation. Making sure that even in an intergenerational dynamic, that there's preparation and an intentionality with that coming together in that relationship dynamic. Because what often happens, especially with brothers in certain generations, when they get around young people, there's still a performative nature of how they want to show up in their manhood, but it's oftentimes is never an exchange and a support
Hmm.
in that relationship dynamic. It's
Hmm.
always
Hmm.
a talking down. I
Hmm.
know something that you don't know, so I have to give it to you. And very few brothers, younger brothers, are receptive in that way. Very few. The vast majority of them are not receptive because they're trying to validate what they know. And it's
Hmm.
hard for them to be talked down to when they're trying to just make sense and
Hmm.
construct the world. So that you have to be intentional with the type of
Hmm.
brothers that you're pulling together. And then there's also life circumstances that make things complicated. Like for instance,
Hmm.
if you have a young brother who's just launched into adulthood, and he's maybe trying to figure out his economic and financial world, or maybe he's just walking into fatherhood and he got a child or two children or something like that. If you have him in the same space, and I've made this mistake with someone who's maybe two times his age and maybe have chemical addiction, that's a different level of need and conversation around manhood if you're putting them together, because they're not going to be fed in the same way. And oftentimes we make that mistake. Oftentimes we don't know that sometimes when brothers are they're few months, few days, few months, few weeks, few years sobriety, that conversation around building into their interpersonal development and manhood emotionally, mentally, has a different need and a different focus than that young brother that's just in their early 20s who's trying to figure this thing out, and he may not be dealing with chemical addiction. So you have to be critically intentional on how those relationship spaces are created and designed, because if not, you kind of just creating something for black men to come together, and you just really checking off the numbers of how many black men is in the room, but you're not being intentional with
Right.
building black manhood with the brothers that are there. I hope that answered that question.
It did in part, and I guess what I should have been more. I mean, it did in part. I mean, it was a great answer to the question,
Hmm.
but I want to go further and ask this without
Uh-huh.
giving names, without giving a name. Give an example, a story of a life of a man that you and your work has
Mm.
touched. And so you don't have to give the person's name. Just say
Oh,
how that man transferred or transformed from this, and now he's here, and he may have
yeah.
a little bit way to go, or whatever. However you want to
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
describe
And
it.
I could give you a name. And I'm actually kind of it's interesting that we're doing this today because I'm kind of in a grieving process
Mm,
with my young brother, young mentee that I've been working with, because I'm proud of him. But his journey is now taking on a different direction where I won't have that level of proximity that I've had for almost 20
mm,
something years. And his name is Shaquille. And you know him, your wife knows him. Um, I've been working with Shaquille since he was in sixth grade, fifth or sixth grade. He was a handsome little waterhead kid, just big, huge head.
right.
Coming to the program at near Imani Youth and Development Center, and he was always in our summer programs. And when I started designing my mentoring program, his mother immediately signed him up. And so I started having a lot of touch points with him through our summer program, my mentoring program, my after school program. And we just built a bridge and a bond. And over the years, it became, very much a mentor dynamic where he started participating in almost every program that I was designing out of the Development Center. And then from there, as I moved into more family practitioner work, he became more closer in terms of like, kind of like a god brother to me. He was there at the births of my two sons. My wife and him are like brothers and sisters, and he became an integral part of our life. And so, um, in that process, I've been able to inform not only in his formative years, the conversation of just being a healthy young person, identity development, working on identifying emotions, working on what academics and how this develops character in ourselves, to the point where I've been able to help him step back and for just advise him on decisions on his career and what he want to do, what college he wants to choose, his interpersonal relationships with his significant others, and being able to just advise and kind of be just kind of a hovering support with how he's making decisions as he launched into adulthood. Eventually, he became a part of an integral part of my business development for my side business that I do in media production. And he was able to learn through our work how to film and how to shoot photography and how to do production, building his skill sets along with the other pieces that he was doing in college. And so our mentoring relationship, or I would say a brotherly relationship, also was fortified with interests that we had, and things that he wanted to learn, that we wanted to learn together in terms of media production and technology. And from there, now he's moving to another state.
Mm,
He's moving with his significant other. Him and her about to get an apartment together. He's moving into video real estate and photography real estate in the state, in that state, and he's branching off. And I'm so proud of him. But in that process of having that relationship with him,
yeah.
to grieve the reality that we're not going to be in that same proximity. He's going to be states away.
Hmm.
Have to know that I was an integral part at a certain season in his life. And it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we're not
Hmm.
going to be connected. It just means that the dynamic won't be it's the same. Um, we won't be a few minutes away from each other. We won't see each other twice a week, 3 times a week anymore. Now it's going to be intentional visits and intentional conversations when we can have them. And
Mm.
I'm proud of him. And yesterday, me and him spent probably like 2, 3 hours just allowing ourselves to cry, to
Mm.
reflect, and to enjoy the memories that we had. We allowed ourselves to just vent about our fears and our concerns.
Hmm.
And then we prayed and we hugged.
Hmm.
And we hugged several times, and we informed that this is just a reformation of our relationship, but it's not the end of our relationship. And so that's a perfect example for me. And I can go through a few like that, but that's one right there where
That's
I'm real
beautiful.
raw in that, where the relationship between me and him not only informed me as a man and
Hmm.
taught me and improved my manhood, but I was able to witness the work that I'm doing in helping to construct another young male to move into his practice of manhood more concretely.
Wow, that's wonderful, brother. That's really good to hear. We need to do more of that work that you're doing. As you were talking, I was reminded. I'm reading this book, this novel by Octavia Butler. I don't know if you've read it, Parable of the Sower. Have you
Oh,
read
my
it?
wife is ready. Yeah, she talks about it. Yeah, it's that's a
Right,
powerful piece. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Did you know the book was banned? Donald Trump just
Yes,
recently banned this book.
really.
It's banned federally and it's banned in most states. Yeah. So my daughter was able to get it
Wow.
for me, right? Somehow. But I got it, right? And I'm reading this and I'm just beginning, right, to read this and getting pulled into the story. But there
Mm,
was something she said in the book, a character or something she said, and I want to just read part of it. And it's gonna it helps me to answer ask this question that I have for you, right?
mhm.
All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change,
It's changed.
right? All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you.
Mm.
How has your relationship with uh, uh,
Kill.
Nikhil changed you? You talked about how it's changed his life, but talk about how it's changed you.
Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting because my wife just gave me that quote 2 days ago. We were talking about it. I
Wow.
supposed to hear
See?
this.
See how
I
God
supposed to
works?
hear this.
Oh
Yes, I see
my.
it. I see it.
God is so
And I
wonderful.
think, and I remember telling her at that time that, and she literally said it because I was crying that I'm still, I'm working through his move. And she said that piece by Octavia Butler, and I said, I guess that's the piece that I'm challenged with is that I know the only thing that's permanent is change. And I know God exists in change. And and when I look at my young brother in my life, I had to always aspire to be an example of what I preached to him. And I know there was many moments where I wasn't living up to that. And so whether it was how to be punctual, how to be timely, how to make sure I'm being considerate of other people's needs, how to make sure that I'm being effective in my active listening and my communication process,
Hmm.
whether it's how I'm being intentional with the valued relationships of people in my life and spending that time and being present. There's moments where I've struggled with that, even with him. And so now my dynamic with him is that even when there was moments where I didn't want to be vulnerable and transparent with him because I always wanted to present him to the best, he taught me that in order for me to be more effective, and I can't say this is required for every mentoring relationship. Let me make this disclaimer. I can't say this is required for every relationship that builds up manhood between a young person and an older person. But in my dynamic with him, in order to evolve his need, I had to learn how to be vulnerable. I had to
Hmm.
learn how to display when I feel weak, when I'm scared, and when I'm concerned. And that allowed him to normalize his experience. And I wasn't used to doing that. Even with my own peers, even with my own children, um, it wasn't
Hmm.
easy for me to allow myself to be vulnerable, to feel fear, to be concerned, and to be out of control, uncontrolled of a situation. And my dynamic with him said, you have to do that. He needs to see that. And you're in a position where you have no choice but to do that. And so it was there and it was present. And I remember him telling me on a couple of different occasions, some of this was around my financial insecurity at one point in time, others was around the pandemic. I remember him telling me, like, I'm glad that I was able to see how you managed yourself, how you dealt with your fear, because I didn't know what to do. And I always knew that if he said, I always knew if I looked at you and asked you questions and saw what you was doing, then I can at least have some ideas on what to do in my life. And I think that was a key moment for me in my conversation and just learning from him that if I don't address this in myself and if I don't change this and learn how to be more transparent with my insecurity and my fear and my
Hmm.
vulnerability, then I'm not
Hmm.
going to be effective in being able to allow men to feel the deeper depth of what it means to be a man. Because men feel fear. We feel it. It doesn't mean we succumb to it, but we feel it and we have to feel it. Sometimes we feel insecure. Sometimes we don't feel like we have the best direction or we're not confident in the decisions that we're making. And it's there. And sometimes being able to allow people to see that uncertainty about ourselves normalize us, it humanize us, and it increases people trust in us because we're allowing ourselves to be human, even though we're still practicing and pushing forth, fortifying our manhood. And that was instrumental for him. And so that was one example that I was able to say, like, wow, I've grown deeper in the practice of my manhood by being in relationship with him.
Well, that's beautiful, man. We only have a few minutes left in this
Okay.
part of our conversation that's going to continue.
Yes, sir.
And so let's talk about that offline. But let me ask you one last question as we close this portion,
Mm-hmm.
this part. Um, how do you see the future for Black men?
Mm, mm. That's the closing question. Ooh, that's gonna set us up for the next conversation.
Thank you, right?
Um, in short, and to be brief, um, I'm concerned with the future of Black manhood. I'm concerned that we're struggling with being able to institutionalize what it means to be a man, to be a black man, to be an African descendant man in this society. I'm afraid that we're not developing the processes to transmit this to generations beyond us. And we're leaving it up to them to learn manhood through trial and error.
Hmm.
And that's concerning to me. It's really concerning because if there has not been more of a pertinent and pregnant moment to come up with a consensus and more uniform process of manhood, black manhood, it's now. There's no more, like, we need this right now. And it's not just to fortify a typology of manhood, it's to restore health of Black manhood. It's to ground ourselves in a spiritual direction of Black manhood. It's to create a necessity and responsibility towards our community through Black manhood. It's to be able to project ourselves as a sustainable people through black manhood. And I'm not saying it's only through black man because we need black womanhood too. But my work is through black manhood. So I'm gonna stay in my lane. And it's concerning that I'm not seeing enough processes that are genuinely trying to create and address this outside of just trying to look good for a grant or to get
Hmm.
funding. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that there ain't some passionate brothers. Because I know passionate brothers that's in that work. But the web of the system that we're trying to do the work in is demasculinizing black manhood, and it's not fortified to provide that the level of affordability to do that work. So some of this work has to come passionately with us outside of being funded. It doesn't mean we can't seek funding. We have to seek funding. But that's my concern is that if we don't create the institutionalized process that is working off of a fundamental, at least communal or regional definition of manhood, I'm concerned we're failing the next generation again with not pouring into them in that way.
Wow. Thank you, brother. I appreciate this. That was so on point what you just shared at the end here. And so again, let's continue this conversation
Yeah.
at our next session. But thank you so much for sharing that. I want to dive deeper into what you ended with, right? What does that look like practically?
Hmm.
How does it play? What does that look like? How do we? Because you have to visualize something in order for it to materialize, right? You have to
Yes.
see it first. You have to. What do you? We have to we have to decolonize our imagination of who we are, and let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
how we do that, right? In,
Yes.
in our next session. So thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much for joining this episode of YANA. This is YANA special with Brother Mujasi Bandela. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's continue this conversation. Really, go to my YouTube page and hit YANA James Trice. A new episode every Thursday. This episode is going to be on a different day, so you be looking for this one. It'll be out soon. So thank you so much, and thank you so much, brother, for
Yes,
joining me,
sir.
brother Mujasi. Peace and blessing to everybody, and remember, we're not meant to do life alone. Grace and peace. Yana is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard because none of us are meant to do life alone.